something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Salutations, good morning and welcome. This is your host, the Readman, Jesse Turner, and you're listening to Connecticut's premier truth station, 103.5 WNHH, and this is the Truth to Power Hour, and have I got a guest for you today. So, Daisy, if you introduce yourself, and during the show I'm going to refer to you not as Dr. Torres Hill, but as Daisy, and you're going to refer to me as Jesse, because now we're here for the Truth Coffee Hour. Thank you. Can you introduce yourself and maybe share a passion or two that you have about learning and teaching?
Well, thank you, first of all, Jesse, for this opportunity to be here today. I'm really excited to engage with you and your audience. As you mentioned, my name is Daisy Torres Hill. I am the new Assistant Dean and Certification Officer for Central Connecticut State University. I officially started just a few weeks ago in January, so I'm very new to the role, but very excited for this new opportunity. A little bit about myself, born and raised in Meriden, Connecticut, so I'm a Connecticut native. Shout out to Meriden Public Schools, who took me in and helped me develop on my leadership journey. So very happy that I'm still in the same state that I was raised in. I've had a beautiful, journey in terms of my role as an educator. I was fortunate enough to actually start my career in education. When I thought about going into education, I started at Central, my very first semester. I was excited to join this campus, and later then transfer to Southern just to be a little bit closer to home. But always inspiring for me to be back where it all started. That's to me very important. I actually went and taught elementary school, got my elementary certification, became a second and third grade teacher in my hometown, which was wonderful. Later, I also got my master's degree and became a teacher for English to speakers of other language students, so that I could support students whose first language was, another language other than English. And that actually gave me a lot of opportunity to work with diverse student populations. So that was a wonderful journey in the middle and high school. I later transferred to the high school and became a world language Spanish teacher. So you could see, in 13 years of teaching there, I love languages. So that is part of my passion that I'll dig a little bit into. The last 12 years, I've been in administration. I've had the pleasure of being a building leader, department chair, and moved on from Meriden and went into New London Public Schools and became supervisor of bilingual education. Those years were amazing in terms of just some of the developments that we were able to do there. And in the last few years in K-12 have been in Hartford Public Schools, where I was director of multilingual learners, and recently the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. All of that to say I had a beautiful 25 years in K-12 before I've now transitioned to higher ed, where I am super excited and passionate about supporting the next generation of educators in our teacher prep program. And, if you heard all of that, you see how passionate I am about languages, supporting multilingual learners. I love learning. I just finished my doctorate degree this past spring at the University of Connecticut. And, I'm just excited to continue to work with students.
So we have a rich background of experience, and it's interesting. I asked you to be on the show because when I started the show last year, I began with Carmen Beloria from Central and Jay Janita from the New School of Rehabilitation at Central. And I had them on for simply, I wanted to counter this anti-DEI stuff that was going on in the nation. And they said, we really don't want to talk DEI. I said, well, how about we talk deserving, exceptional, and included women in leadership? And so that's the theme that I like us to go with. You can talk about maybe what were your biggest challenges as you climb that ladder up. Did people see you? Was your voice heard? And I would, as a white faculty member who is retired, I have seen 30 years of women and Latino and Latina and faculty members of color who have struggled extra hard to accomplish things, to be at that table. So could you tell us a little bit about the challenges of women in leadership today? And I think it probably should reflect a little, was your multilingualism valued? Did people sometimes, I'll have people say, they put the whole world on my shoulders because I spoke Spanish or I was black. So all of a sudden I became the leader and of dozens of initiatives. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience? Because you did win an award from the Connecticut Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, and you could tell us about that award as well. And then you're in charge of some scholarships, which I'm hoping, I have my Blue Devils color tie on today. I'm hoping that some of our students get those scholarships. I mean, they're significant. They're $10,000. But could you tell us a little bit about your journey as a woman in leadership?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. Such an important one. And I'll tell you, it'll go back to when I was a student, right? A younger student. I saw very little representation when I was growing up in terms of women in leadership and women of color, to be quite frankly. There was, back in those times, low expectations of certain students who came in where English was not their first language. And I recall in those times, I had my best friend was what we would now call a multilingual learner. Didn't have the language at that time, but I remember that our school tracked students. And so we had, classes that were identified as, A, B, C, D, and E. And we knew very, quickly that the A level was for your highest honors and your E level was for your most remedial. And my best friend was one, she was very smart. Yes, she knew, English was her second language, but she was proficient in both. But that's not the assets and the values that the school saw in her. They saw her as having a deficit, that she needed remedial support services, that she borderline might need to be identified for special education. And so she was placed in those lowest level tracked classes. And I remember at that time being upset and angry about why we weren't in the same courses. I was placed in a B level course, which was a little bit above average. And I felt she was equally, if not more, in those days, more intelligent than I was. She could take a test and she could pass it with flying colors. And so that became the start for me of where I saw some inequities in education as a student. And, as I continued my journey, I noticed that, staff and faculty, I just didn't have, people who looked like me. So I didn't really understand what that could look like for a young Latina like myself. It wasn't until I got to high school where I met my now mentor, and she was my high school principal, Dr. Gladys Lavis. And Dr. Gladys Lavis is currently a professor at Southern, and she has a 35-year career in public education. And I'll tell you, when I met her, it was like, wow, this was a no-nonsense high school Puerto Rican woman who was running that school. And she just had a way about her that I was afraid of, to be honest with you, as a student, but at the same time intrigued. Like, here is a woman who has, who's in a leadership role and who has respect and she cares about the students. And so I continued that journey of, okay, what else can I do here to aspire to that? And I'll tell you, she developed a culture in her building where her high school counselor was one of these people who was such an amazing individual, Mr. Rob Smazik. He was my counselor who, in my junior year of high school, that summer right before, he said, listen, you have a lot of potential to go to college. I want you to go to a summer program. And I want you to go there and I want you to experience it because I do think that you should be really strongly considering some of our state schools and some of our schools in the state in surrounding areas. And so I attended that summer program and it was amazing. It was an opportunity for me to collaborate with college students on campus. I lived there. I took courses. I interacted with students from New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. It was absolutely phenomenal. And that because of that, recommendation and me completing that program, it's really what put me on the track to like, I can do college. I can aspire to this. Right after college, right after high school, and when I was about to go to college, I ended up taking a gap year, and I did the AmeriCorps program, and that program put me in a school, and that's how I ended up really, working in the school system, learning about what a teacher does, and that is when I decided this is it. I'm going to become a teacher. And I'm going to enroll at Central. And that's exactly what I did. And I worked and I became a mom during college. So I had to juggle, being a single mother as well as, being a college student at one time, full-time, non-paid student teaching. All of that gave me those experiences where, I really want to push through. Teaching is what I want to do. And I want to continue to get to, achieve my goal. When I continued teaching and involving myself in the school communities, I later learned about an organization called the Connecticut Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. It's called CALAS. And it was right when I entered my administrative journey. And I'll tell you, Jesse, it was the most amazing experience. I took what I saw with Dr. Lavis, my high school principal, and now I'm in an organization where, oh my goodness, there were women leaders all across the state in all kinds of roles from, assistant principal all the way up to the superintendent level, state organization, levels. It was amazing. And that was when I said, wow, this is an amazing network of individuals who can support me in my journey. And that's exactly what happened. I joined the organization. I became very active. I later became their president. I'm still on the board, and we are an organization that is just committed to supporting Latino students, multilingual learners, and advocating for women in leadership and Latino talent to rise up in the different levels of educational leadership. And so I tell you, I found home when I found that organization. And my high school principal, funny, Dr. Lavis is what we call our madrina. And the madrina is our godmother. She is a very important thread, a very important member of our organization. We are so fortunate. And so I just think those opportunities have really helped me to see what was possible. And then to also now in my role as past president and in my role now in assistant dean is to pay it forward and start to bring up future educators and leaders into the profession so that we can continue to build the pipeline and to reimagine what it could look like for young leaders like myself.
Yeah, and you definitely are breaking a ceiling. So I was at Central for 30 years, and the dean, the associate dean, the assistant dean had always been white. Helen Abadiano has been the first person that was different. And Helen is a friend of mine, but I'm just saying, and that's, we haven't had that diversity in our leadership, and things have changed drastically as we reimagine that school of ed over there. But I've always said as I don't get to be on many of the searches when I was there, but I was always cognizant that if we want to increase our diversity of students, then we need to put people in leadership positions, just like you were talking about your godmother. And callous, and you're like, and it has an incredible impact. So if we want to increase Latino and Latina students into our program, they need to see somebody somewhere in those leadership roles that they can identify with. there's research about black educators, and it having any student who has at least one black teacher, particularly black students, will increase their chance to go to college. But that's also true of any student of any color. So one black teacher makes a difference. So my feeling is we could do the same research and see the same for one Latin teacher, one Hispanic teacher. We'll make the same goal over there. And not only for Hispanic students, but for all of our students in our programs. But I'm glad to see you there. I'm very proud that we broke a ceiling at Central when Zuma Toro was appointed as president. There's 150 something years of history of white men as our presidents, and now, by the time she retires, there will be a picture of a Puerto Rican woman as a president, and I can't wait until that portrait's put up in Founders Hall in that moment, and I hope there's like an unveiling in that piece. But it's a piece over there, and I think it also helps us to do, because the other piece that I see in bringing diversity is that we start to realize, we recognize talent, and we start to see that talent in other people. So it changes the bicultural look at others. So as our students are seeing an incredibly talented certification officer and assistant dean at Central, they'll be over there. White students will change their perceptions of Latino leaders and schools and people over the way. And that was easy for me because I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. So our daughter talks about tios and tias and abuelas and abuelo. And, my family's like, who are those people? And I'm saying, that's Tio Mel, that's Tio Jose. Yeah, we got that. But it was a truly powerful experience for me. Su casa, mi casa. Come in, sit down, have a cup of coffee. You want some chicken? You want some rice? Come on, we'll take care of you. And it became you. If you were a good person, and that was the thing that in my growing up in the community of Puerto Rican mothers were. If you were somebody that wasn't a crook, somebody who was smart in school, they're like, yeah, we want you to come around the house, come talk to us and stuff. But I'm excited, and I'm excited about reimagining. Of course, the research on bilingual ed says it was positive. It had great results, and I don't know what's happened. It's sort of almost a war on bilingual education. So we had bilingual teams at every one of our school districts, and I haven't seen them of late. And that's across the country. Began in California, went to Texas and stuff. But bilingual education is successful. Dual language education is successful. The research is unquestionable. And recognizing students who speak multiple languages as multilingual learners, we have a ton of research that says this is positive. So maybe you can share a little bit about the transition from bilingual to multilingual learners. Might be good for the public to know.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a really important question, particularly in the times that we're living. And so I'll start with my love of wanting even to go into bilingual education. In Meriden, we had the program, and we had success with it. But again, there was still this level of it's something wrong with the student, and they need these services versus what is it that the student is bringing, right? The assets, like why are we not celebrating, right? And amplifying those skills and abilities that students bring that enrich, right, our communities and in our global economy. And so that to me was always something that fascinated me in terms of why is that? And so when I finally became an administrator and went to London as my very first role as supervisor of bilingual education, I remember tapping a lot of my colleagues out in the field, or really joining forces and organizing to really understand why, bilingual education was sort of, looked at and viewed at in such a way. And I think a lot of it is, this lack of understanding of what exactly, the program is and how it supports students. It really, it goes back to what you were just talking about, and it's the research, right? We know that students who come already with a foundation in their primary language, they already have those skills. And really, when they're learning English, it's about transferring those skills. And they, we know that research also points to the fact that the more that you know in your first language, right, the easier it will be to do those transfer skills. And so that alone, this idea that we had to, move just to English only movement without understanding deeply the research was one piece that I uncovered when I first went into the role. And when I came into that position, I even looked at the term English learners, or English language learners, as some people call it. And that term in itself talks about what the student needs to work on, right? This is something you need to do. You need to learn English, versus a student who's bringing multiple, right? In some cases, we had students who knew 3 and 4 languages, not just 2. And so this term multilingual learner started to emerge in the field. I remember when I first went into the role, and I embraced it really quickly, and really ensured that our teams and people understood why we were shifting, because names matter. How we address our students is very important. And so it starts there with some shared understanding. And so we started with a lot of building that capacity of, research and the benefits of, the difference between bilingual and dual language. And, a lot of the bilingual models are transitional in nature, where you had X amount of years, 3 years, before you transitioned into an all English, or mainstream classroom, as some call it. And I'll tell you that dual language, what's so beautiful about dual language is that you are learning both languages, right, simultaneously, and that there's emphasis all the way to the commitment, all the way through from pre-KK all the way to high school, right, in some districts. And it's the idea that you're not just, favoring English or one language over the other, but that you truly believe in biliteracy and the benefits of being multilingual and all of the cultural competencies that that brings to a student. And so when I was in Harvard, we embraced the seal of biliteracy, right? The seal of biliteracy is a recognition, a very nice recognition you put on a student's high school diploma and their transcript to really honor the bilingualism and the biliteracy that they bring with them. And we wanted that to be recognized and celebrated. And also, those recognitions do bring a lot of benefits out in the job force in terms of, workforce development. And for colleges and universities, it actually allows students to, advance in world language courses and receive credit for that. So we really did a really nice, job of trying to ensure that our multilingual learners knew that they were to be celebrated and that they were to be honored for the work that they are doing. It is not easy, right, to learn another language. And these students are coming in, right, with all of these wonderful skills already. And I think that's really important, particularly as we think about global literacy and what our students are going to do when they graduate high school. Not all of them are going to stay local. Not all of them are going to go to college right away. Some are going to go international. And so it's really important that we prepare them for the realities of what that could look like. And quite frankly, the United States is behind, because if you go to any other country, right, they are learning 2, 3, 4, 5 languages. And so, I have a very strong, stance on what I feel is really important in terms of advocacy and honoring languages and language learning.
And it's interesting because I've just returned from Arizona. While everyone here had snowstorms, I had 70 to 80 degree days for the past, 10 days. And it just came back for the last little snow. And I was like, oh my God. But about in Arizona, we are talking about in Tucson is really a multilingual community. And it's just amazing in terms of schools there, in terms of, waiters. Every waiter will speaks multiple languages. Same thing. If I go to Europe, I don't struggle. I'm going to have a waiter, whether I'm in Budapest or Prague. There's going to be a waiter that they're going to automatically start speaking English to me. They're going to think you're an American. Is there, what would you like? These are our specials tonight. And they're proud of speaking that language to show off their English skills. The same thing, they're the same thing with their native languages. But this concept, and when I was out in Arizona, Arizona's the home of the Code Talkers. And during World War II, the Navajo Code Talkers, they were able to transmit over the radios, saying, critical information on military maneuvers that they were about to do. And they did it in Navajo. And the Japanese, there were no books at that time to tell you about Navajo. So they had no idea what was going on. But the Code Talkers are heroes, and they weren't only Navajo, they were Hopi, they're Tohono O'odham. So all the native people who were in World War II, specifically in the Pacific Ocean, were over there using it. The same thing would be true in World War II in the European sectors. We had an army of German translators, an army of Italian translators, of French translators, in our country because of that. And it's such a positive piece. And of course, it's going to be, if you put on your job application, I am a multilingual person. I speak English and Spanish. I speak English and Japanese, right? I speak Arabic. I mean, you've got to be on my list over there. You've got to make the interview list over there. So yes, it's a positive piece. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did at Dwight Belizzi? You made that a dual language school, or you helped in that process, I believe.
Yes, I was. When I took the position in Hartford, I was hired as a director of multilingual learners, and one of my charges was to work with the school team in transforming the school into a dual language academy, the only one in the entire district. And so, I had some experience of that in New London. I helped to create a extension of our K-5 program into the middle school. So I had the higher end of program development in terms of dual language, but I was very, very interested in learning about how do you begin a program right from pre-K, and that feeds into the middle school. So I was really fascinated with the charge from our superintendent, Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez at the time. And so I really worked with the school team, and we collaborated with the Multi-State Association of Bilingual Education, or MABE, who is, an organization that has a lot of experience with dual language programming and advocacy. And so we partnered with them, and we were actually on a 2-year study in terms of just making sure that our program was meeting the needs of the neighborhood. As we know, Dwight Belizzi is located in the south end of Hartford and has a high population of Spanish-speaking families. And so we knew that our dual language was going to be created to serve our community first and foremost. That was our number one charge. And so we wanted to make sure that that was happening. And so we created, I guess you can call it a task force, to ensure that all of those pieces were in place. And we were set to launch right before the pandemic. So our very first kindergarten class actually happened during the pandemic, which was interesting. But I will say that what an amazing team at Dwight Belizzi in terms of just supporting the implementation of our model. And as you know, dual language is one of these programs where you really have to be intentional in terms of ensuring that students are receiving instruction in both English and Spanish, and that you have highly qualified teachers, right, to teach in the program, and that you have really strong leadership support, which we were thankful that we had leadership from central office to the school level to the classroom that really supported the implementation of that program. Today, fast forward a few years, they've rolled up all the way to grade 5. So they are now pre-K through grade 5, and they are now in the development of middle school, because they are a school that goes all the way to grade 8. And so I'm still very much connected to the school in terms of just like consulting and supporting some of the teachers and leaders there, just as they embark in this new journey. But something that I think has been amazing is just watching since the implementation of year 1 in kindergarten to now that that cohort of students are now 5th graders, the data that has suggested how much they have grown in their language arts and math. And usually that's what happens with dual language programs. Unfortunately, why there's not as many you see here in Connecticut is because there has to be a commitment there on understanding that you're not going to see results right away in terms of academic achievement. And that's because, as research shows, it takes time for language acquisition to occur, right? We know it could take anywhere from 5 to 7 years, all right, with really strong implementation. And so we knew, right, it's now been about the 5th, 6th year that we are now seeing some of the results of that. And I love it because I still follow, because I know that is such an important program. And I'm so happy to see that it's continuing into the middle school years.
So and the research as well supports with lots of documentation the positives of dual language education and bilingual education. And I often will say that when we look at the English only push, it often comes with a reduction in funding and services. So ed research talks about America spends $23 billion more every single year on predominantly white wealthy schools than it does on black and brown and poor schools. And then so some of that idea, you said services, and I think that one of the other pieces that I read in your bio, you brought teachers from Puerto Rico, from the Dominican Republic, to come to the U.S. And I remember that from when I was in high school. My Spanish teacher came from Puerto Rico, and she was the only teacher that let us. We ended every class with a little salsa. So Willie Colon just died, and that's a legend and stuff. But Willie Colon and Hector Lubot were the end of all our Spanish classes, and we're all dancing, and we could always say "Wega," we got something at the end and that stuff. But the positive, could you tell us about that initiative, recruiting teachers? Because now, if you have a dual language program, you need some teachers that speak. If it's going to be a dual language program with Spanish and English, who speak Spanish. Could you tell us about your efforts?
Absolutely. And, you are absolutely right. In order to, continue programs such as, transitional bilingual ed or dual language, you need teachers, who can speak the language. And I just want to comment one thing on that you mentioned about services, and important to know that with bilingual ed, budget crisis, those services can't go away. They are required by law, right? And I think that's a misconception some people also have, that those are some of the first programs that might be able to get cut, and they're not, right? There's bilingual legislation about schools who have 20 or more students in their building who speak a language other than English are required to receive, they earn the right to receive bilingual service as well. So couple that, because we had a couple of those transitional schools in Hartford, plus we had this new dual language academy, we needed to think about a recruitment strategy. And so with our superintendent and our chief of academics at the time, Dr. Madeline Indron, and myself, the three of us really collaborated and thought about a strategy in terms of working with Puerto Rico. And that came through Hurricane Maria, right? We had a huge influx of students and families who came to Hartford and relocated there, as well as staff members who had strong connections to the island. And the three of us leaders at the district level were all Puerto Rican. So there was just a lot there in terms of starting with Puerto Rico first. So we collaborated with some universities over there, as well as hired a liaison who had experience with recruiting teachers from the island. And we did just that. We engaged in a strategic plan where we were intentionally recruiting teachers to initially to teach in our bilingual and dual programs, but then we realized that we had teachers who were fully bilingual who could teach in some of our shortage areas like math and science and special education. And so that we went and we recruited, we started with a pilot with just 3 teachers. And that was, again, was around COVID. And so COVID slowed us down a little bit. The following year, we tried it again and we brought back 16 teachers in year 2, right? And so the program grew intensively. And what stood out from any other recruitment strategy, in my opinion, is we don't need a passport, right, to have teachers come over to Hartford to teach. We had a really strong partnership with the Connecticut State Department of Education in terms of looking at teacher reciprocity. So that was a win-win for us. And, you know, we really wanted to ensure that we gave our teachers what we called wraparound support services, which means that they received professional learning, this cohort. They received membership into the CALAS, or the Connecticut Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, for networking. We had them meeting quarterly for collaboration, for social events. They created a sort of a text chain so that they can check in with each other. We had monthly monitoring meetings. I was the liaison. And those supports that were there for them really did make a huge difference in their ability to stay in the district. Because part of the strategy wasn't just recruiting them, it was about retaining them, right? And to this day, they still have an 89% retention rate of those teachers who started with us in year 2. So the strategy worked. And from there, we expanded to what they called Caribbean Connections, in which we then looked at other islands that we could recruit teachers from, particularly for science and math that we continue to have a need. And so we embarked in a pilot of recruiting 4 teachers from the Dominican Republic to come teach in Hartford under the Visiting International Teachers Permit with the State Department of Education. And we had amazing results with these 4 teachers, also all still in the district. So much so that we then went back and expanded to Jamaica, to U.S. Virgin Islands, a couple other places to continue growing and diversifying the staff. So 2 very unique, but also very impactful recruitment strategies that Hartford undertook that I just was very proud to be part of, because I think it was not only diversifying our staff, but also just really helping the relationship, right? The collaboration, the partnership we had with both islands of Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. So something that we continue to watch and monitor from afar to see how it continues to develop in the district.
You're going to help do that at Central for us as well. You know, we had imagined during the COVID and the hurricane in Puerto Rico that we would be getting some students, and we did get some students. So President Toro did bring us some students. I had one of them who was sort of my little student worker. She was wonderful. She categorized 5,000 books in a literacy center.
Wow.
I mean, that's not an easy task in Excel sheets for me and stuff, but it was wonderful. You also, so I was looking at your bio, and you talk about scholarships and about read to a child. And I was thinking, you're also an author of a bilingual book about a loss of a pet. Tell us about that. What was that like? And I could imagine you should be a star in our literacy center down there. You need to tell Louise and Dina that you want to come and read to those kids, because they will love it. And we have lots of kids who speak Spanish and English who love that concept. So could you tell us about your children's book? I mean, I don't know very many assistant deans with a children's book. Actually, you might be the first. And I think Carmen Valoria, at the administration in the other over there, she was another. So I've known 2 in what, 70 years? So could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Absolutely. And just as a side note, I did visit the center, by the way, and met Dana. What an amazing place that is. I just thought it was absolutely engaging. I was, just really impressed with the amount of books and just what the department is doing for students who are, here at our university and learning. Right. I think it's an amazing center. So I just wanted to name that
Oh,
because I
thank you.
spent
Good,
my
good,
time
good.
there. So yes, I am an author, and as you heard me, right, I'm very passionate about multilingualism and cultures and languages. And back in 2018, my son and I were, we had a family pet. Her name was Lily, and we had her for 14 years. And when she passed, it was just like such a devastating experience for us. So, I was always a journal writer, even as a child, and I've always loved reading books. So I was journaling a lot at that time, and
Home care makes a difference in people's lives.
and I connected with a colleague who owns a publishing company, and she and I were talking very informally about, some of my journals and what happened with my dog. And she says, "Hey, if you ever want to put that pen, and paper to an actual book, or let me know, send something my way, and we can look at it." And so I did, and I was surprised by her feedback in that this is something that we could absolutely market and get out into school communities and with and also social workers and counselors. And basically, what I really wanted was a book that was bilingual, because I knew in my field, right, in the work that I was doing, that there is just not a lot of bilingual stories for students, for bilingual programs, for dual language, and for homes, right, where there's more than one language spoken. So I really wanted to contribute to that field. And so the book is called I'll See You on the Bridge. And it is about, based on the true story of the relationship of my son, Brandon, and our dog, Lily. And it was a beautiful story. And it's a way for educators and families to talk to students and children about death, but in a way that isn't sad, right? Because it's a natural part of life, but in a way to bring light and to showcase and highlight the beautiful relationships that pets have with humans. That's really what I wanted, as well as the message of, bilingualism and being able to share the beautiful language with families and students. And so, I think this is important to note too, is I don't, earn anything from the sales of these books. 100% of the proceeds goes into a scholarship for a student from my high school where I graduated in Meriden to enter the field of education. And I did that purposely because I wanted to give back, and I wanted to continue to grow, right, our pipeline of educators. And what I love is this scholarship has been going on for about 6-7 years.
Language text can be. During Reads to America, we were at Chamberlain Elementary School, and I taught the secondary literacy course to our undergraduates. And I brought a bunch of them there. And in the fall, I had a lot of Spanish teachers in the class. So we already picked out dual language books. And one of the young men, a former serviceman, a military man, he had picked a book on Oscar de la Hoya. And we had the book, and so we picked it, and I would go into the class, and I'm kind of a joker and stuff. So I run into the class and I said, "Look, I got a great book about Oscar de la Hoya. He's one of my favorite boxers." And then I look and I get real sad and I say, "Oh my God, it's in Spanish and English. I'm lost. I need a super Spanish teacher." And so then Manny crashes through the door, comes through the door, says, "Dr. Turner, I am a super Spanish language teacher over there." And so we read the book. But what's the unique story was we were reading it, and we had one, we're reading it in that class because one of the Chamberlain teachers said, "I have a lot of recent arrivals from Peru, and I think she had Ecuador, but those Central American kind of, well, Peru's not Central America, but Spanish speaking kids." He said, "I really don't know too much about them." So one of the kids, and this is a second grade classroom, I'm reading the book in English, I'm reading about this. And the thing with Oscar, I like that book, is he had attention deficit as a child. So and his mother used to make him write lists. And it's a great book. He writes the list of what to bring to these celebrations and stuff. But what was beautiful was I was reading English. There was this one 7-year-old who kept getting closer to Manuel. And Manuel's reading the book in Spanish. And finally, he grabs it. He said, "You want to read the book?" To the 7-year-old kid. And sure enough, he starts reading the book. And his teacher, I remember his teacher said, "Video that, Dr. Turner. Take that right now. Make sure you record that and stuff." But it was one of those things, and that young man became instantly in the eyes of all the other students in the class. His teacher, he became a reader on that day, but he was already a reader. And he just loved reading the book. He was a little ham. So he also wanted to show pictures with the book. So first we did it like this. "You read it, Daisy, you read it." He's like, no, let me hold the book and I'll do this and stuff. But he became a star that day. But yes, the power of a dual language book. And I've seen that work in our literacy center, not only for Spanish speaking kids, but Muslim kids. They're all speaking classic Arabic. So I had young girls from Morocco who we had some books, dual language books that had some classic Arabic in it. One was about a bookcase. A family builds a bookcase, and it's a series. They build this bookcase in multi languages and multicultures, and this one was in classic Arabic. And of course, they just ran and grabbed that book and wanted to read it every day. And think about fluency needs repetitive readings. I'm sitting there, I'm saying, yeah, they're reading it every day. That kid wanted the Oscar de la Hoya book so he could read it every day. And I just thought about it. He's reading it in Spanish, he's reading it in English. Such a wonderful experience. So yes, I love the idea that you did a book. And of course, pet loss, I mean, to a child, to any of us. I became a dog owner at the age of 68. So I'm 70. I've had my dog for 2 years. Anything happens to my dog, I'm going to just cry for months. I know that already. His name is Toast. The kids helped. They had to guess his name when we got him because he was a rescue dog. And they all knew that when I was the director of the Literacy Center. But yes, we had collected, we got some grants and worked with some other colleagues. So Shelley Jones from math, to get diverse books. And we also put them in the curriculum lab. So we tried to match whatever books we were buying for the Literacy Center and put them in the curriculum lab. So because students would always come and say, "Can I have this book, Dr. Turner?" I'm saying, well, kids are coming in today, they might reread that book. And I'm not a library, I can't lend it out. I don't know if you'll bring the book back. But if you go to the curriculum lab, so we do have a lot of diverse books in our curriculum lab on the fourth floor over there and stuff. But yeah, it was wonderful. And I'm thinking that this idea of read to a child, this is the connection with Evie Velasquez, the assistant deputy superintendent at New Britain. She'll love that idea, and maybe it can be that we all get a copy. Now you see, I'm trying to put myself in there. I'm get a copy of the. I'll see you on the bridge. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get my own copy. I'll get a signed copy, but that might be something to think of over there. But I'm glad you read to our children in the Literacy Center. I hope if you read your book, you also read in Spanish too, because we have lots of kids who speak Spanish. Same thing with parents. Parents love to see those kinds of books. They would come in and they pull them out, and in the hall would read them and stuff. But it's an unbelievable, powerful, motivation to learn and inspire, and it definitely can turn a new immigrant to America into an instant reader, because they really thought that this young man, this 7-year-old, really had no learning skills whatsoever until he jumped up and just started reading, the book. And we thought, maybe he's just a little crazy kid, but we're like, and we're over there, we're saying, oh no, you're accurate, because I know a little bit of Spanish. I'm like, yeah, this looks accurate to me. What do you think, Manny? And he's like, Dr. Turner is word for word. He's got him over there. And we had a lot of fun with that. But yes, and I'm excited about that. I'm glad that you've done a book, because you bring not only a wealth of experience as an educator, you're bringing a wealth of, you're an author of a children's book. That's like a doorway. Kids hear that and they're excited. You're a superstar to them. So
Yes.
anytime you read your book or any book in that center, kids are going to love it. But I'm sorry, I'm taking us away. I want us, we're coming down to really the last 5 minutes of the show. And what I really want, if I can, give us some solutions, some promises, the hope. It's the season of Lent. And so for Catholics in Lent, they had faith, hope, and love. And so the hope gives you the love. So give us your hope for, your time at Central.
Well, first, I want to just thank you, right, for this opportunity to be here and to share my story and my passions. I think it's such an important message, right, for young folks, for educators, for listeners to hear. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I would say that for me, I have a lot of thoughts around my new role, just that I'm thinking about in terms of giving back and preparing the next generation of teachers who will then become our leaders, right, in our school system. And so for me, I want our teachers to really understand who they are and that their presence matters, right, and that they have a wonderful opportunity to help students feel seen and noticed and really engage in the love and joy of learning, right? And so I really want to bring back that idea of joyful learning, right? And how do we create experiences for students where they love to come to school and they love to engage in learning. And that is something that I think in my role, I have some level of control and support to help develop the program in a way that allows our teachers to get out in clinical placements and student teaching, right? So that they are receiving high quality placements under mentor teachers and supports that we as a university can help them develop and grow. I also, would love to give a message to our aspiring educators as well in my role, in knowing that, what you're doing is very important in terms of the work of education. It's hard, but I think it's important to know your why and to stay anchored and connected into people like mentors who are here to support you, to stay involved and to be willing to learn always and be that model for your students. I think that to me is something that I'm hoping in my role that I can help and share my story. I actually am going to Dr. Clark's class here on campus on Tuesday to do just that, to begin to share and to show students the possibility, the what if, right? What can I do later after X amount of years of teaching? Maybe I can be a leader, right? What does that look like? And so the idea here is to show them possibilities and to be hopefully a role model for young women and inspire them to dream and think big.
And now you're going to add to our association, our Latino association, right, of principals and superintendents. Now we're going to add higher ed leaders
Yes.
to that as well. So and we have a number in there, but you'll add that
Absolutely.
and giving out scholarships. I think it's $10,000
Yes.
scholarships annually.
Yes.
And I have a feeling that there'll be some central.
Yes, there is a whole table.
And I've already told you to talk to the Spanish department because we have great teachers and that's a department where they not only might become bilingual or TESOL teachers, but our Spanish will become Spanish teachers, but they'll also they're just going to be incredible. They're incredibly motivated. So we've got our 90 seconds. So you've got your last, thank you. You were a wonderful guest. And that's it. All the time we have for today, people. Sorry. I wish I had you for another 60 minutes. I want to thank all who tuned in today. We appreciate your taking the time to listen. And, if you want that truth to power hour, you need to listen to 103.5 WNHH New Haven. We are the beacon of truth in Connecticut. And so I think if we hear the music, then it's over with. But you can say a couple of words and thank you. And you represented Central well. You can tell Dean John Burrell, you were Blue Dog, true and true.
I'm a Blue Dog, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thank you again for this opportunity. And yes, just to note that CALAS does offer our scholarship. We are sharing it right now with our students in terms of an opportunity, right, to apply and be recognized at our annual gala that's happening on May 9th at the AquaTurf. And so we are looking forward to having a full table this year that's representative of Central. So I'm excited to bring Central into that fold. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for this time to share and to engage. I'm really excited that I was able to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.